Hey everybody, welcome back to another interview on the Agape Investing channel. Today I'm here talking with Aaron Mason, the Director of Expansion at Nextdoor Photos. We're here talking about how they are able to apply a redemptive supply chain into their business model. In this interview, we discuss how you can have a kingdom impact while still making profit within your own business. Aaron also gives us some practical tips on how to apply a redemptive supply chain into your own companies if that is something that you are looking to do. Okay. Hey, Aaron, how are you?
Good, Katie. How are you?
Good. I'm super excited to have you here today. We got connected through kind of a mutual acquaintance and just met last week.
Yeah.
And I knew after our first conversation that I had to share your story with others. And yeah, I'm super excited to have you. But yeah, today I wanted to start out by, if you just want to give us a quick introduction, kind of into how you got started in Nextdoor Photos, where you're at right now. And yeah.
Great. Awesome. Yeah. Thank you for having me. I think it'll be fun. Judging by our first conversation, I think it'll go in a lot of different directions, but hopefully it'll be valuable for everybody that gets to listen. So, I graduated from a small Christian liberal arts school with a business degree. It was my fifth major in 5 years. So I kept
Wow.
changing. I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. And I didn't really ask God what he wanted me to do. So I was trying all these different things and eventually landed on business. I come from a family of preachers and teachers. So a lot of people helping missionaries as well. And so business was a foreign concept largely in my family line. And so I landed on business. I figured, there'll be a way to serve God with this, but who knows? And went into the corporate world right out of college, worked at a Fortune 100 company, had a real blessing just to learn kind of high level business and territory sales and sales directing, stuff like that, for a number of years in Chicagoland, and got burned out after about 3 or 4 or 5 years of just being on the road constantly. And my wife, we were newly married, and she just said, it'd be great if you would be home more. And so I did what I think a lot of Christians do when they get kind of burned out in the corporate environment. And I went into nonprofit. And so I kind of swung the other direction, I guess, is a good way to put
Mm-hmm.
it. Went into the nonprofit world, thought, well, I can use my business skills to serve God here. But got burned out in that in about 4 or 5 years. So I kind of had a 10-year career early, through my 20s into my early 30s, and kind of was at this crossroads of, man, I'm a millennial. I want to make an impact with everything that I do. We're an impact generation,
Yep.
and exactly. And then, but I also loved the idea of profit and revenue and
Mm-hmm.
building scalable solutions and businesses. And so I sat kind of in between these two things of, I want to make an impact, I want to make profit. How do I do that well? And especially as my faith kind of became more central to kind of who I was in my adult life, I just sat with that question. And that was when I met a couple of good friends here in Michigan who had
Mm-hmm.
launched a company called Nextdoor Photos, and it was basically a whiteboard idea. They had 2 locations, but they were really just proving out, business systems and processes and things like that. And they kind of painted the picture of, well, what if we could build a company that did both? It was for profit, and it built a scalable business, and created wealth for those involved, but also there was this huge social impact and kind of kingdom impact piece to what we did. And so it literally was an idea, and
Yeah.
joined back in late 2016, early 2017, and quit kind of the corporate, cushy job, jumped into a startup, and it's been a huge journey. But I should probably tell the listeners exactly what we do. So Nextdoor
Yeah.
Photos, we are a real estate photography and media company. So we provide anything visual, kind of visual media wise, photos, videos, floor plans, 3D models, drone, aerial is big now. And we provide that for our clients, which are real estate agents and brokers. So we do that with also, and we'll get into this a little bit, but our impact piece is all of our media has to be edited. And we turn that around next day to our clients, fully edited, delivered. In order to do that, we needed, quite the supply chain of editors to be able to do that. And we outsourced that to a couple of our partnerships overseas. They're amazing groups. And those groups are specifically geared and built to employ people rescued from human trafficking and sex slavery, or people at severe risk of exploitation within their work. And so we really built this to try to kind of partner both of those things, like I said. And it's been a journey over the last few years, and we've hit a bunch of bumps along the way. But that's kind of, that's what we do. And that's kind of the heart behind what we do at Nextdoor Photos as well.
Yeah, I really like that you guys, you almost have like two problems going on. Like, how can we help real estate agents get photos quickly? But how
Yeah.
can we also help people who are struggling, overseas with different, human trafficking issues? And you're kind of solving, in a sense, two problems at the same time through this concept of a redemptive supply chain, which,
Yeah.
when we had talked the other day, that was kind of the first time I had heard this concept.
Yeah.
Can you give like a brief overview or kind of a definition for people to kind of simply grasp that concept?
Yeah, yeah, it's fun because I feel like every time I have a conversation about redemptive supply chain, the
Mm.
definition moves and morphs a little bit
Yeah.
because we're continuing to learn kind of God's heart in supply
Yeah.
chain and in business, and how do we do that. But for us, it was breaking down, a business into the different systems and workflows and processes, and figuring out where can we insert something that is redemptive, something that partners with the Holy Spirit in providing either jobs or training, or a service or a product, right? I mean, so
Yeah.
you're right. We can talk about really serving our client well in fixing their problem, which is, they need media for their real estate to turn it around fast,
Mhm.
sell homes faster, especially in the market we find ourselves in right now.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And you're in the industry, so you totally understand, especially in certain markets all over the US. I mean, houses are selling within a few days. And
They're
so
so fast.
the longer a real estate agent has to wait to get media to get it on the market, then all of a sudden they're losing a few days of getting it
Yeah.
in front of potential buyers. So that was our number one thing. We're going to do
Mhm.
that. We're going to do that excellently as a company. What's cool is we didn't necessarily start with the impact. We didn't say, oh, we care so much and our heart is for anti-human trafficking. We want to help with that. That came after we built kind of our systems and our processes. And then we looked at those things. I think this is maybe where a lot of Christians, especially in the social impact business world, get stuck, is they specifically focus in on an impact piece or an issue, whether it be clean water or human trafficking or what have you, and then they try to build a business that will hopefully help that. Where we went the other way, we built a business, and then we said, where can we insert a redemptive piece? And so, for us, or for me, working in a large consumer packaged goods company for a number of years, I understood somewhat supply chain. I understood that there's usually, from the time the raw goods come in to manufacturing to shipping, logistics, all the way to the end customer, there's all these pieces and all these players in that supply chain. And typically, that's where companies can really maximize their profits. They can start to cut out
Mhm.
this person or pay less down the chain. And every single time it touches somebody, it either exploits somebody down the chain,
Yep.
or or it raises the price at the other end. And so that's a lot of times the supply chain is where companies find they can cut costs, they can pad their margins, etc. And so, for us, we had a simplified supply chain where there wasn't too many middlemen. I mean, it was outsourced to a media editing partner.
Mhm.
They turn that around and send it back. But the issue is within the world that we live in, you would be surprised that technology and outsourcing technology, or what we would maybe say is more the blue collar technology field.
Mhm.
So maybe not the high end dev, jobs, but this photo editing or bookkeeping, some of these back end systems we didn't
Yeah.
even know, but those things get passed down and they build almost a secondary supply chain that is exploitative. And so when we figured that out, when we heard that, that was what kind of sparked in us, oh, we can cut that out and actually directly partner with an organization or a person on the ground. And so for us, it started in the Philippines. Now we have operations in Kenya and Nepal as well.
Cool.
But the goal for us was, let's take this one piece of our entire operations and let's insert a partnership that would, we believe, bring kingdom value and redemption. And so it just happened that we got plugged into a really great couple in the Philippines that were already utilizing kind of a talent pipeline from
Interesting.
anti-trafficking organizations, and they had about 20 people on their team when we partnered with them originally about 3.5 years ago, and now they have well over 250 full time.
Wow.
They're one of our primary. It's who we started with our editing supply chain, but now we're taking all the learning that they've done, and they've got trauma therapists and doctors and amazing an amazing operation. We're taking what we've learned with them and we're saying, okay, hey, friends in Nairobi, Kenya, let's build something here to help with this. Okay, our team in the Philippines is going to launch in Kathmandu, Nepal, and they're going to replicate what we've learned there. And so I think for us, it's been a big learning curve. We can
Yeah.
take care of what we've said is we can take care of the demand. We're building Nextdoor Photos. Now we're in 50 plus cities across the U.S. and we're going to scale to hopefully 200. But we can take care of the
Yes.
demand side if we can empower through our supply chain side. So that's kind of the idea of redemptive supply chain. I think the way we think of it is we use it as a place to empower people instead
Mhm.
of extract value or extract more margin out of our supply chain. And so I think that's been a learning curve. Obviously, we've had to expand and then retract and then expand and then figure this out and go here. And it's been a good journey with God. We've been on a high growth trajectory for the last 3-4 years, doubling in size year over year for 5 years straight now. So
That's
that's
so
a,
cool.
that's a lot to learn. But I guess that's maybe an overview of our supply chain and kind of maybe some of the ideas that we bring into it when we're thinking about supply chain.
Yeah. So I love one thing that I think is really interesting about your story is that you started out kind of in this Fortune 500 company, kind of working like what corporate America kind of typically looks like for us. And then, you kind of got burnt out there and then went to the nonprofit because you're like, I want to make an impact for the kingdom. And what I find so fascinating is that Christians, like a lot of us, like, and even the church kind of tells us the way that you can make the most impact for the kingdom is by working in a church or working in a nonprofit or working in a ministry. However, that's not necessarily the place where most of us can make the biggest impact. Obviously there's people that need to be in those positions. My husband's a youth pastor and what
Mhm.
he's doing is super important, but for the rest of us, like, I'm not gifted in those areas. Like, I don't, I can't necessarily like lead a church or lead children in a ministry, or even like sometimes just like the idea of working in a nonprofit like
Yeah,
doesn't suit my talents and gifts.
right.
And
Yeah,
kind of like what you're saying is that for yourself too, like, you realize that you can have this kingdom impact, you can have this value for the kingdom of God
yeah,
in just a regular business. And it's kind
yeah,
of like this almost like mind-blowing concept of like, oh, these are where my gifts and talents lie. I can
yeah,
actually make an impact for the kingdom by providing jobs, by providing income for families. It's kind of like the Bible verse in Matthew 25 of like, for when I was hungry, you gave me something to eat. And when I was
yeah,
thirsty, you gave me something to drink.
yeah,
And, you're not necessarily working in a nonprofit to do these things and giving people clean water or food or shelter or whatever. You're doing that through providing jobs. It's just so practical. And
yeah,
there's a need for it in the kingdom of God.
yeah.
So For us, for those of us who are in the business world, obviously, like a for-profit company, we're trying to make money. That is kind of a
Yeah.
way to measure success is by your profits. But
Yeah.
how do we as Christians kind of balance that with, our own beliefs? Like, is it even biblical to try and max out our profits?
Yeah. Yeah. I love this conversation, and we should be totally honest, right? Neither of us are theologians here. So we're
Hmm.
gonna we're gonna
Yes.
we're
Truth.
gonna talk from our examples
Yeah.
and our history and experience. But I think a lot of this is, especially in the current climate that we live in, the current culture around business. I started my professional career in the throes of the 2008 recession. So literally Wall Street was getting raked over the coals, business was bad, exploiting people, all this stuff. And here I am, like this new Christian minted business degree, and I'm like, wait, you can't serve God in the business world. Like, that was my thought, exactly like you
Hmm.
said. And when you start to get into like revenue and profits and maximizing profits, I think there is this difficult thing I've been wrestling with lately of, can I maximize profits, or can that be a goal of mine? And can I love Jesus in being
Hmm.
a businessman or woman? And I think I'm struggling with that. I think it's very
Yeah.
difficult for me to say you can maximize profits while still caring for the people within the supply chain, or the people, or the client, or the whatever. Um, because I think ultimately, if my main goal, my number one goal, is to maximize profits, I have to be true to cutting costs and cutting this, or maximizing my margins, etc. And I think that's very difficult. There's a true tension between that for us, because ultimately, what we've found at Nextdoor Photos over the last 3, 4, 5 years is the Holy Spirit will ask us to do things that don't make sense, maybe from a business perspective, or what you would read in your business journal or textbook.
Yeah.
um, but it tends to work out really good. And I think you can find that throughout scripture. You can find stories where Jesus uses examples of business people
Mm.
doing things that don't necessarily make a ton of sense, or take a big risk as well. And so I think there's a tension there. I wouldn't say that you can't. So maybe we won't
Mm.
go that far. But I would say it is a big wrestling match, if we're truly doing business God's way, to say that maximize profit has to be the number one thing. So
Mhm.
for us, man, we wrestle with that as a leadership team. We wrestle with that just for how we structured our business. We didn't go the franchise route, even though we're a multi-location business. We went with joint venture partnerships. We wanted to steer clear of maximizing, because the franchise world is really good at maximizing profit for the
Yeah.
franchise. And so now, it's not to say that we're not focused on profit. We have to be profitable. Um, and in fact, we believe in wealth creation, and we believe that that empowers people. So even all the way down
Yeah.
to even all the way to our editing teams. Interestingly, we've done a study, or our partnerships have done studies where the people working in our editing supply chain, many of them become the wealthiest people in their families.
Interesting.
Which, now, to be fair, a lot of our workers have come out of the slums, or different very, very low income areas. But the interesting thing is, paying them above a livable wage, sometimes double the livable wage in these countries, actually creates wealth for their family, for their extended family. So yeah, I think it's a fun conversation to kind of go back and forth on. And it's not the easiest one, but I would say one book that I read years ago, early in my career, was The Search for God in Guinness. And it's
Oh,
basic by
yeah.
Stephen Mansfield. It's basically the historical record. He kind of wrote a biography on the history of the Guinness family, and the history of Guinness, the beer, and the beer company, and how God used that company and the wealth created and generated for the Guinness family, and to really change the trajectory of, A, people's lives, but B, an entire nation. And it was just this first view for me of, oh, like you can create wealth in a really large company and do a ton of good if you do it right, and committed to God. And so that was a big eye opener for me. I think I first read that back in 2009, 2010. But it's been kind of a linchpin book that I recommend to people that just want to see a view of what does it look like to build a large, international company on kingdom foundations.
Yeah. I love books. I've been recommended that book numerous times, and I just rewrote it down right now because I'm like, it's like the 10th time like in a year I feel like someone has said that book.
Here's your
Um, are you familiar? You're familiar with the hotel supply or the hotel chain Ritz Carlton?
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
so Horace Schultz, kind of the same idea where he applied these biblical principles, these lessons that he saw throughout the Bible of how Jesus treated others and how he thought we should treat people, or how he thought he should treat people in his business and in his company. And again, just great success. And I think it's kind of like this interesting concept of, okay, we shouldn't be focusing primarily on maximizing our profits. If we do that, we're going to fall short. We're going to feel empty.
Mhm.
However, when we follow the teachings of Jesus, all these principles that we see throughout the Bible that we can clearly apply to our businesses and our companies and organizations, we end up being successful. And it's just like, it's inevitable when you follow the ways of Jesus. Um, and so it's kind of interesting when you hear those stories and you're like, oh wow, there's something to this, and it's like
Yeah.
kind of crazy.
Yeah. Oh, I heard a really good story about Ritz Carlton, where and maybe you've heard this, but a little kid left their bunny, their stuffed bunny, at one of the
Oh,
Ritz Carltons, and so the parent emailed in to customer service, was like, "Hey, can you please try to find Bunny? We were in room such and such," and but they had already flown back home, right? And so this young child is just demolished. They thought they lost Bunny, and Ritz Carlton, the manager of this Ritz, basically went around. They found the bunny, and they went around the hotel and took pictures of Bunny at the pool, and pictures of Bunny at the beach,
oh,
pictures of Bunny eating dinner, and they sent Bunny. Mailed it home to the little kid with all the pictures, and basically was like, "Hey, sorry, I was having a good time without you. Here I come." And that, like, I think that speaks to exactly what you're saying. Like, there is something about creating joy for people, right? That is a kingdom principle. There is something about good customer service and taking care of people. And those types of stories that I read that about, I think it was Ritz Carlton, years ago. I mean, I read that and I was just like, man, that is the perfect example of how to
yeah.
live out something through your business, that we're talking about. So
Yeah, it's kind of, I mean, it's like, how can you go above and beyond to bring excellent quality, whether it's a service or a product, to your customers. And I think that you're doing a great job of that, by figuring out how can we get photos and videos and things to these realtors quickly,
yeah,
and also trying to provide another redemptive side to the business, by providing jobs for other people too.
yeah,
So if someone's listening to this right now and they're like, hey, I have a business, or I want to start a business, and
yeah.
I want to be able to apply this concept of a redemptive supply chain
Mm.
into it, what practical tips can you give that person, maybe to research, or where to go if they're looking to do something like that?
Yeah, it's fun because I feel like even 5 years ago there wasn't a ton of stuff out there, but now there's some really cool groups. Um, Faith Driven Entrepreneur is a really good one. You may have heard of them.
Yes. Yes.
I think that's a phenomenal kind of network now. But there's podcasts, books. Their website literally has a resources library where it'll say, here's the conferences you should go to, here's the books you should read, here's the podcast, I mean, just tons and tons of stuff. From a research perspective, I love researching things. And then I would also say the Business as Mission Network, the BAM network. Uh,
Yeah.
is a phenomenal place where I've met a ton of people, like-minded people that are really kind of like, well, I don't know how to do it, but I'm willing to learn and I want to. And that's a phenomenal group of people. And that's a kind of worldwide movement. So it's real fun to see what God's doing globally, I think, as well. And then probably the number one thing I would say is run with those like-minded people. So find those people, use LinkedIn, use podcasts like this and groups like this just to try to network and find those people to have these types of conversations. And I think you can do that in the church world as well. I think you should be able to walk up to any pastor and say, who are the business people? Like basically give them the profile, right? Like, I'm looking to connect with other people, business people that love Jesus and are trying to do this. And any pastor that knows their flock should be able to point you to 2 or 3 people. Like, oh, you should talk to so-and-so. So yeah, I mean, I'm big on relationships. And so I always tell people anytime I speak or am on anything, I'm like, hey, hit me up on LinkedIn. Let's connect. I'd love to jump on a video with you and just talk about what's God doing. What are the opportunities out there? I think there's a lot of opportunities. You can also check. Now, this isn't necessarily a Christian group, but the B Corp movement. Obviously, B corporations or benefit corporations, we're a certified B Corp. So if you go to the B Corp website, you will have a list of companies that literally their entire goal is to use business as a force for good. So there's all these social impact companies, all the way to like Patagonia, Ben and Jerry's, some really big companies, which is great, right? Who doesn't want to wear a nice fleece and eat some ice cream? That's like,
yes,
those are B Corps, right? But all the way down to like little guys like us that are scaling and growing. But the cool thing is you'll find companies that specifically are going after business as a force for good. And you will find quite a few Christian owned companies in that. But man, if you've been laid off and you're looking for a company that maybe you could do this type of work in, start there. That's a huge list of companies that really care about this stuff.
very cool. Yeah, I haven't gone to that B Corp. It's just like the B Corp website. So
Yeah. Just
I'll have
Google
to
B
go check
Corp
that
or
out.
benefit corporations, and it'll pop up.
Yeah, and I've heard of I've been on the BAM website, the Business as Missions network, and definitely have connected with the Faith Driven Entrepreneur, and they have like different like branches now. They even came out with like the Faith Driven Athlete, which I
You.
sent over to my husband because he loves sports. So like, you should
Yeah.
check this
Well, and
stuff out.
they have faith driven like real estate. So they have like a real estate tab.
Do they really?
Yeah, like real estate stuff they're adding in there.
How did
And
I not know that?
to be fair, a bunch of the people in the faith driven investor world are multifamily unit investors, like stuff like that. So I think there's a lot of real estate overlap.
Yeah. Cool. Well, Aaron, this has been awesome. If people would love to connect with you, how can they reach out to you?
Yeah, I would say from a work perspective or kind of professionally, LinkedIn, that's probably my main thing. From a personal perspective, Instagram, I'm on Instagram, and that's a fun place to interact now. I'm not necessarily on Facebook, so don't look for me. But LinkedIn is probably the best place, or you can head on over. If somebody's interested in hearing more about Nextdoor Photos, you can go to nextdoorphotos.com. Nextdoorphotos.com/ownership is to learn more about the ownership opportunity that we have. That was kind of another thing, is if people are like, whoa, wait, I think I might want to look at launching a Nextdoor Photos in my city. We're looking, we're trying to grow and scale so we can grow and scale that impact piece. And you do not have to be a photographer or anything to do with photography. Trust me, I work here and I do not know anything about it. So I always tell people, you do not have to be a creative to own a real estate photography and visual marketing company. We'll train you on all the technical aspects of it. But we are always looking for great people that want to join what we're doing. So you can always go to our website and peek that as well.
Cool. I'll make sure to link to that in case people are interested. But thanks
Cool.
again, Aaron. I know that this interview has been awesome and that there's a lot of really great practical advice throughout this that I'm sure everyone will it'll be crunching in their minds. I know after our first conversation, and even now, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like just kind of mind blowing, some of this stuff. But
Thank you, Katie. This is fun.
yes, thanks again. I will talk with you soon.
All right.
Hey, thanks so much for checking out this video. If you enjoyed it, give it a like, leave a comment down below, and subscribe to my channel. That way I know that you're enjoying the content I'm putting out and will create more just like it. If you have any suggestions, feel free and reach out. See you soon.